good way to put this to Shelley. Yeah, you could have performed better, do better. Heard a lot of talking, somebody's got an answer. Natalie?
It comes down to just being able to have the difficult conversations and saying, you know, this is what you're used to and what you've always said. Management now. Can you not hear me?
Oh, I can hear you just fine.
I don't want to get on that thing.
That's very good.
But just being able to have the difficult conversation and saying, this is the direction we're going in. You know, you're valued. We appreciate what you do here, but this is what we are needing you to do, and be flexible. And I recently have a new boss, but he taught us about the training cycle, and if people don't like the way of the new direction, they will more than likely churn and leave the department, and you hire
Churning. Yeah.
staff that will be flexible and will, you know, adapt to that change.
Very good.
So,
Very good. Anyone else have a good way of saying to Shelley how she needs to improve? Don't be scared. If you talk about it enough, I won't give you the microphone.
Joe, what we said was, you know, just have a departmental meeting to make them feel like they're part of the decision. So if you're all talking about it together, it doesn't look like he's coming in and saying, okay, you know, this is how it's gonna be, but if you make them feel like they're part of it, we know this has always worked in the past, but, you know, change is good, maybe we need to look at a different way.
Good. Very good. Change is good. We've had to discuss that a little bit up here too, where we talked about maybe addressing something in a team environment where everyone understands the expectations and everyone understands that everyone else understands the expectations. And so we can kind of, by doing that sometimes, depending on the issue, we can kind of hold each other as a team to those expectations and standards.
What I did mention though is, and like Joe said, it depends on the issue. We had a situation once where a woman complained of sexual harassment, and she went to the sheriff and said, I've been sexually harassed. And so he was Johnny on the spot. Okay, the next day we're having a training meeting. We're getting everybody in here. We're gonna, you know, by God, put an end to this sexual harassment. And who did he call up as a person to do the role play? The very person that had just made the complaints. You know, and he was innocent in it and thought, you know what, I'm just going to put a stop. And he really thought, I am doing a dang good job. I'm going to make sure this doesn't happen again. On the opposite side, she turned it around and said, I was mortified and I was made the example, and even it embarrassed me even more. It made the situation even worse. So you have to be very delicate on those team meetings and not singling out the person. You know, singling out Shelley, you know, having a role play and having somebody crying out of the office and say, now Shelley, would that be something that would be appropriate? You know, in front of the whole team. That would probably not be the best approach.
Any other good approaches? Anyone else have any good way to handle this, to talk with Shelley? No?
You might want to find out if Shelley has a particular problem that requires her to be gone at noon every day, if she hasn't disclosed.
Yeah.
I mean, there may be reasons, so you need to explore these things before you take a definite stand.
Or maybe there's something that we are doing that's preventing her from doing something. You know, a lot of times we look at them as the problem instead of looking at us or some environmental issue that might be causing the problem. Very good, Mark. Jeff?
Another thing, you know, along with what Mark was saying, what you said, maybe the whole staff is okay with her taking that 12 o'clock lunch break. Maybe they've worked out their schedules and they're fine with that. And that is the new supervisor is the only one that has a problem with that. So he needs to be more flexible, perhaps.
Right.
It's based on the situation. You have to maybe have that team meeting to figure out what the real issue is.
Very possible. Very good. Thank you.
So we've talked a little bit about the fact that she likes her schedule the same way. What about the fact that she is mean to these people, these two specific customers? What are we going to say to her about that? Yeah.
Why flip it and say not what we're going to say, but what we're going to ask? You know, what is it about those two people that's making, you know, the situation to where you're making that person cry? I mean, is there a history with those two people? what's going on. I mean, you're not supposed to be doing that, but what is the reason for you doing that?
So finding a little bit out about the situation, if there's an underlying cause. Yeah.
And then one of the things that Brandon said to follow up to that I thought was great, is, and then you say, now, I know I'm new here, I may have some different expectations than what the expectations have been in the past. Everybody who comes in needs to leave feeling valued, yada, 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 based on what they're saying, but then set a clear expectation. And say, so moving forward, this is what we're gonna be doing.
Okay. Yep. Did you have a comment in the back?
They said it.
Okay. Something I like exactly what you said. Once you get, kind of lay down your expectations, find out, what the reason is, what the history is, and then follow up with that. I like the fact that you're going to follow up with that. A lot of these performance evaluations, everything, that's the one key thing that I found as I've lived some of these experiences, is that you need to follow up. You need to go through and find out how they're doing. Just setting the goals isn't good enough, so I like that. And sometimes we may have to sit down with Shelley and be blunt and say, hey, look, let's find out why, and then set those clear expectations as, you know what, you really can't treat our customer, the people that come into these title companies, you really can't treat them like that. Let's figure out something and how to improve that and set some goals there. Yeah.
When you're actually having that critical conversation, it's important to point out that she's actually really very good with everybody else, and start with that, and that lead into, so what's going on with these customers? What's the problem here? You do so well with everybody else,
Yeah.
and she's likely to tell you.
Yeah.
I like the let's too, how you mentioned, it's not always, it's not a bad employee you're dealing with. It's a behavior that you need to modify. So again, a lot of it's the perspective and how you look at that person. I'm a firm believer that most people want to do a good job. And so if you talk with that person as a, hey, let's do this, it comes across, I think, a lot better than you need to do this.
Sometimes what I do, because I want to empower managers to take that role. I mean, in our grievance policy, we always say resolve it at that first level before you bring in HR, obviously. And I tell them to ask open-ended questions, kind of like the Jungian philosophy of, so, what is it, I always say compliment them, tell them what they're doing right, and say, I'm very impressed with what you're doing with this project and how timely you have been. And I detect that there's some personality issues or some kind of a negative vibe I'm feeling. What do you see as the solution to this, or what is it that you think we could work on together so that they never have an opportunity to say nothing, or, and even at that you can prod. But I think you're right, it's sort of like you do your due diligence, you try to turn that obstacle into an opportunity, but I've encountered quite a few who are just, okay, yes, and thank you, and wonderful, and then they go complain to everybody in the admin building and at the city council and anyone who will listen to them.
Right.
So you can only go so far before it becomes to that point where, okay, this is what we've talked about, you've been in agreement, it's time for, maybe a verbal progressive discipline issue, so.
And then you get to the heavy.
Yeah, which is unfortunate, because you think if they could trust you, and that's what the managers need to do, obviously, is build that trust to say, you can tell me what's going on without retribution or retaliation, so.
Right, and I think it's important that we train our managers. I mean, we really need to train our supervisory staff, and I appreciate when Washington County was talking yesterday about hiring good supervisors.
Right.
I think it makes our job a lot easier when we do have good supervisors, but sometimes, we're all rough around the edges, so we need training continuously and help. Well, gosh, that's what we're here for. We need to train our supervisors how to handle these things. And I think if you catch it beforehand, then a lot of times it doesn't turn into stuff like that.
What about, and I'm just throwing this out there as part of the due diligence, that, and this could go hand in hand with customer service, or if say that person, Shelley, is mean and makes other coworkers, one or two coworkers cry. What about approaching that customer or those coworkers and finding out, hey, are things okay? I apologize. I saw that, I heard that you left uncomfortable and upset. Is there anything we could do to rectify it and maybe find out why? What the source of that was. Maybe that person was just having a bad day and maybe it wasn't anything that Shelley did or didn't do. Or maybe it is a personal relationship issue or something. Because sometimes, as you all know, it's kind of like that telephone game where you whisper in somebody's ear and things get changed from one step to the next to the next. I was just out in St. George yesterday, and they have an issue with a high-up employee who's been there for like 22 years, and there had been some major complaints about his performance and his attitude. Again, the whole issue with, first thing I asked was, performance evaluations, have you done any? Oh yes, and unfortunately they were all great for the last 22 years, even though he's had these attitude problems for years. Well, he had a couple of instances, and he ended up being demoted. He's now appealing that. And so in preparation for this appeal, these folks are going to those employees or former employees who they were told that they quit because of his horrible attitude and his horrible behavior. And they've contacted these employees and they said, oh no, he was cool. We were all good. I was going through a rough time in my own life, or I had a better job elsewhere. And yeah, he got a little annoying, but I was annoying back, so really it was no big deal. And they're saying, okay, we don't want to go through with this appeal maybe and make, we're going to look foolish. And so perhaps going to those people at the time, making it timely, and just kind of getting to the root of the problem, not in a harassing way or anything, but just kind of a customer service approach of how can I help you? Is everything good? And getting more information that way.
I like that. Hey, I noticed you left upset the other day,
Yeah.
Did something happen?
Something happened, just want to make sure you're having a good experience here, anything we can do for you in the future. And that could open up a direct line of communication of, you got this person, Shelley, who's just out of control and this is what she did or didn't do. Or, who knows?
Should we look at number 2?
Yep. Everyone ready to do that evaluation for scenario 1? Okay, scenario 2. Scenario 2, a little bit different. This time I'm a facilities maintenance supervisor. I have a crew of 4, okay? So one of them, Steve, has been with my crew for 4 years. And is one of them that he questions everything I do as a supervisor. Okay? The majority of the time, it's in public. So he likes to question what I do in public. But he also likes to take little jabs and pot shots at me when we're in their office as well. So in order to keep the peace, I've just kind of shrugged it off, laughed it off, but it seems to be more severe and frequent. And it's starting to disrupt the whole department's performance. Okay? So I've conducted the last 3 years of performance evaluations on Steve without really noting anything about the fact and how he treats me and things like that. So what are some of the issues that we need to address here, and then we'll break up again. Yep.
Well, I guess you need to start having the productive conversation or documenting it. Not necessarily going back, for forever, but as what's happening recently. And then I think rather than just saying you need to treat me with respect, you need to, or you don't treat me with respect, you need to say, this is what I mean. You need to give the exact examples and either say this is what I want to have happen or this is what needs to quit happening. Not just the general.
So I need to tell Steve, I don't appreciate it when you treat me like this, or I don't appreciate when you confront me in public. So address the issue with Steve. Okay. Anything else we notice in here that we need to address before we kind of figure out what we need to do next?
Is that his only problem?
Yeah.
The rest of his job performance fine?
Yeah, I mean, he's an average employee, but the fact that he kind of, I don't know if he doesn't like me or just likes to take little criticizing me and pot shots at me.
Then it, you know, in my opinion, needs to be a one-on-one between you and Steve. Figure out what the problem is with him as an employee and you as boss.
Okay? So get with your partner and discuss a little bit about what, how you would say that.
How's that discussion gonna go?
Yeah.
When you talk with Steve about it? You could even play